I'd like to introduce our presenter this morning, Georgina White. Georgina.
All right. Good morning, folks. Thank you for those people who clicked on my link on the very loaded agenda that we have for today. There are some great sessions being offered, so I do appreciate the click on mine. So, all right. So today we're going to kind of talk about how to improve student motivation to kind of encourage and lead your students into self-regulated learners, which is kind of a little bit of a mouthful, but we'll kind of get started with just a little bit of background on myself, and then we'll work our way through. I will offer some time for questions and engagement, and hopefully some knowledge sharing and information sharing of best practices from you folks as well, because the more you put in, the more you get out. So hopefully we can have a little bit of a best practice sharing at the end. So where I started. I put this picture up because I really kind of started to get my instructor hat on with the Sea Cadet program. I went up through the cadet program at the age of 12, and I coached sailing. And that's how I kind of learned my very basic principles of instruction. And it's funny, at 15, I learned the principles of instruction that I guess the military uses. And I still to this day have a tendency to refer back to it because it links creating interest, emphasizing key points, class participation, making your students feel accomplished, and then confirming their learning. And it's kind of something that stuck with me as I kind of transitioned to where I am now, and I teach at the School of Ocean Technology at the Marine Institute. So I kind of went up through the cadet program. I joined the reserve force. I taught at, or I still teach at an instructor school where I teach people how to teach and do professional development with them. Um, and now currently I work at the Marine Institute, teaching kind of a bit of everything. I teach, I'm mostly with the ocean mapping programs and the ROV programs, but I also teach online with our BTech and our MTM programs. And most recently, I put on another hat, and I'm going to be taking the reins on a certificate of leadership program. So that's kind of where I am now. And as you can see, the pictures definitely have a link to them. And I started very young on the water, and I'm still teaching on the water. So my main drivers obviously was my love of the water and my love of teaching that I really kind of developed very young. I've been a student for a really long time, and most recently was a graduate of Memorial last spring with the Master's of Education. I also did my Master's of Environmental Science. So I've been a student a long time. So I like to try to add to my courses of how I would personally want to see them as a student taking those courses. So it's always nice little role reversal or walking in other person's shoes, I guess, to kind of add that little bit of reflection. Like, what would you want to see in your course if you were that student taking the course? So, what are we going to kind of touch on here today? We're going to touch on the why. Why are we even discussing this? The rationalization for this. Talk briefly about the student. When I originally did this research, I focused mostly on first-year students, but it is something that I've quickly learned can umbrella over all years of being a student. Briefly talk about our student motivation, and then what can we do as instructors to lay that foundation to formalize those relationships and promote self-regulation in students. And then kind of what's next? What can we do? What do you folks do? Maybe we can have the opportunity to share a little bit of our knowledge and kind of do a little bit of a brainstorm on how to make things better in such a crazy time. So understanding the why and laying that foundation hopefully is going to kind of build those tools in your toolbox. I like to use that analogy all the time. Everybody carries these past tools that from your past experiences and your courses and even courses you've taken that you like. So trying to build on that is kind of what I kind of am going to strive for today. So this was kind of the question that I posed to kind of get started in laying the foundation of this research. So how can instructors improve motivation to develop self-regulation in first-year post-secondary students? But like I said, it's not only first-year students, it can translate beyond first year. If anybody listened to the keynote speaker this morning, he mentioned about motivation and engagement is that critical and vital part of learning. Basically, students who believe that their achievements and our successes are linked to their efforts and ability, they're more confident and more likely to strive for that excellence or self-regulation. Okay, so that growth mindset is very critical in the student. I just have a quick little statistic here with regards to Stats Canada. So between like 2010 and 2013, I believe that stat was from, was that 60% of students do not graduate their program. And that can happen for a variety of reasons. However, hopefully, if you create more of that actively engaging and engagement classes and dynamic instruction, it will kind of motivate your students to learn. So it's kind of, how do we do that? How do we get them to be committed and successful in those academic endeavors? So self-regulation, what is it? Self-regulation, I kind of put a few key points around this here. So that critical awareness of oneself, students who are motivated, proactive learners in with regards to come prepared for class, have those time management skills, have the confidence in themselves and with others in a group. Often people have a tendency to compare themselves to their peers, so having that confidence, and then creating those positive learning environments, positive thoughts within the student, and creating that environment that is going to build the trust and build relationships that would help foster that self-regulation. Okay, so that's kind of where I was going with my question, is that as an instructor, I always, I do teach a lot of in-class first-year courses at the Marine Institute, but I also then not only taught the in-class ones, I now transitioned, like many of you, to online learning with those first-year students. And that poses a little bit of a different challenge, because when you're there and you see someone, you can read their feedback, you can read their faces, you can read their body language, you can kind of give them that little pat on the back or say, how are you feeling, and kind of do that. But when you're sitting in a room, your room, and then you have a bunch of names on a screen and no faces on a camera, how do we then encourage these positive learning environments to develop those relationships? And I'm sure all of you guys who have done any type of teaching over COVID probably have either struggled with this, overcome this, or learn from your peers on ways to create that. So I'm hoping that I can learn just as much from you guys today as what you're going to learn from this, hopefully. So our students, I didn't put the first year student down here. I just call it the student. So we have to take into account that this is a wild time for all of us, including our students. So many different stressors here with regards to our time management, balancing commitments. I don't know about you folks, but during the two lockdowns that we've had here in Newfoundland, I had my daycare closed. So I had my 4-year-old home and my pets home and my husband home. So it was, I'm not sure which was worse out of all of those. But balancing those commitments was very hard on me. And I was not doing a 5-course load or a 3-course load or whatever the case that some of our students were doing. So adding those compounding stress and then thinking of things like financial. Many of our students work part-time jobs to pay for their normal bills and tuition. And many of those jobs were ones that got shut down over lockdown. They got laid off. They had to, there was a lot of financial and social stress, and then obviously personal health. Um, Mental health, physical health. I had some students reach out to me over the past year who actually had COVID-19. So to work with them with regards to the flexibility of deadlines and that type of thing. So just keeping that in the back of your mind that if you could list out all of your stressors, add that to the students plus all their coursework for individual courses. So just to kind of put that in the back of your head when you're kind of drilling out all of those expectations and deadlines to your students. 50% of college students are unprepared for their academics. Now, if you guys go back to when you joined your first year university or post-secondary, think about, you bought your new book bag and you got your books, and then you walked into the class and you looked around, and Dr. Felton made a comment today about the imposter syndrome. I think at some point we all kind of felt like we were unprepared. We're like, what are we doing here, right? So how do we prepare our students for what is to come? So faculty should kind of aim themselves to assist with engagement. A lot of things are focused on student retention and graduation numbers and how we get them from point A in year 1 to year 4, or to get that diploma in their hand. Whereas I think we need to flip a little bit and talk more about being dedicated to the student learning and creating those meaningful relationships. Because as it was mentioned earlier this morning, it's not just those paper in hand and those learning objectives that they have to meet. We're really trying to build those students by adding the tools in their toolbox for ideally setting them out into the world. I had a conversation with my students yesterday. They're third-year students. I was in a boat with them actually in Holyrood, and I said, it doesn't matter if you get a 50 in the course or 95 in this course. It's how you are when you get out in the real world. What did you learn? You should have those time management skills. You should be able to be confident. You should be able to be open and professional and not be that person who I call the stick in the mud, or you want to be able to volunteer to go in the field and do that type of thing, because those are the important things that's going to carry them forth in their careers. Not, I aced that stats test. And so we really need to kind of have those conversations with our students to ideally do a little bit more of the transformational versus the transactional. So student motivation. So what did I kind of look at here for our student motivation? I dug deep into a lot of theoretical aspects. I read a bunch of different theories, and to be honest, each one of these I ended up making the connection back to student engagement. So I looked at these theories, for example, the self-efficacy theory, which kind of relates to that competency to complete a task. The goal theory with regards to the, mastery versus performance goals. The Universal Design for Learning framework. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's basically the Center of Applied Special Technology. came up with a framework that optimizes your improves and optimizes your teaching and learning for all individuals. They kind of state that learning to an individual is almost as individualized as their fingerprint. So how can we most reach those people and promote things like your why are you learning? What are you learning? How are you learning? And making those connections to push them forward to self-regulation. And the common thread in all of this was student engagement. So it links student engagement to that critical factor. So stimulating the engagement by building an individual's confidence, setting goals, creating that purposeful and meaningful learning environment. Those are the things that are going to then push those student forward so that they can step out as those individuals and say, I not only learned A, B, and C learning objectives, but those things that make them feel like they've really accomplished something. So an instructor can help stimulate this. So they can assist this self-regulation so that they can become more meaningful connections. Okay. So it really linked. So these theories ended up linking mostly to my student engagement, but then I kind of had this, what I call my full circle moment, and it linked right back to what I learned when I was 15 years old about those 6 principles of instruction that I got taught as a sail coach and as a cadet. And those 6 principles of instruction, it's actually abbreviated as something that's called ICEPAC. And it stands for I is interest, C is comprehension, E is emphasis, P is participation, A is accomplishment, and the last C is confirmation. And if you think about those very simple, that acronym, it links to student engagement. You're creating interest in your course, you're highlighting the key factors, you have participation, you make that connection and make them feel accomplished, and you kind of confirm what they learn. And that confirmation could come in a conversation or a test or assignment or whatever the case may be. But those kind of links right back to how are we creating that engagement opportunities. So how do you do it? If you're an instructor, well, I'm sure you guys have some thoughts on that. How I kind of posed looking at those theories, I posed a few different learning strategies, really. So one thing is goal development. So each one of those theories really stated that setting goals, monitoring those goals, and providing the opportunity to self-evaluate that would be key in the self-regulation process. So how could you do that as instructors? Well, one of the key things that we could do, and it is very simple to do, is allow some time for reflection. And that could be guided reflection. And something simple that I did to kind of provide that opportunity is that I created some online polling. So some questions that they don't need to get submitted to me. It's just some things that they can prompt some questions to them and give them some opportunities for that thoughtful, like, okay, what did I really learn here? But not only what did I learn, how am I going to apply that when I'm out in XYB field? So it may be as simple as putting 2 questions on your slide and then allowing them that opportunity to try to make those connections themselves. It provides the opportunity for students to do forward thinking, really. And I'm sure you guys had conversations with students before that they do not always think forward. They think of the now and how do I get that passing grade? But really, we're trying to formulate that transformational thought of what I'm doing now that's going to help in the future, right? With regards to self-confidence building, you're going to have and we all have this, and we have it in even our group today of we have those people who are full of self-confidence, and we also have those people who are sitting back, cameras off, saying they're probably already grading on the side and doing something else and only half listening. And don't worry, I'm not judging you. I've been there before. So, but you have those people who, how do you really draw that out? So you want the students to believe in their ability. Once they believe in their ability, we can then build on that, and they're more likely to step out and step up, right? So how do we do that? A simple way, once again, with regards to the online thing, which I use both in class and online. I use a web page that's called Poll Everywhere, but there are many different options. A lot of students don't want to speak out in class, whether that be virtual or in class. So it's basically, I put up a little poll for questions at the end of my class, rather than that whole raising their hand. And you even have students who raise their hand like this because they're kind of like, I don't really want to raise my hand, but I do know the answer. So I pose the questions, and then they literally just take out their smartphones, and then they click on their question and they click on the answer, and they can see if they got it right or wrong, and we can have a conversation over it, but it's not known to everybody. Right? So things like private test results, anonymous polling, can really help build this. And they're more likely then to see if they're getting things right. Then they're like, oh, okay, I don't mind speaking out. I don't mind. I do have some right answers, right? So it may help with that. With regards to the positive instructor-student relationships, our keynote speaker did mention a good few of those. So I'm going to piggyback a little bit on him this morning. With regards to building that, somebody had mentioned this morning like an open door policy. And I'm not sure if we all want a full open door policy, because we still do have to have some type of boundary set for our students. Because one of the things I did find over COVID is that I have students, international students, living all over the world, because, well, we're crossing out those boundaries now. But I did find that with regards to time zones, I found that a little hard to manage when a student wanted their 12 hours in the difference, right? So having those set boundaries with regards to office hours and availability might help. I also know that Brightspace has the tools to link office hours to WebEx, and students can actually go in and sign up for a time slot that you suggest. Like, here are my time slots availability, and then they can hop online and you can see them and you can talk to them. Or you can do the audio calls and you don't have to share your video. So creating that space for engagement and those one-on-ones, it's not something that every student is going to avail of. However, you can make yourself available so that they at least have the chance. One of the things that I learned very quickly over COVID is that I miss people. And I know our students miss people too. So to have those opportunities to share and engage, and it doesn't always have to be about the course content. I kind of used to hook my online students into thinking that they were coming to a session about my course content. And then I would flip it and be like, how are you doing? How's this? And I got more comments about dogs and kids and supper recipes and all of this kind of stuff, because people just wanted that interaction. So for my solely online courses, I used to host what I call live Q&As twice a semester. Not something that they have to do all the time. I do record those sessions so that if they're not available, that they can go back and see it. But I would link it to what I would call probably 2 weeks before one of their assignments are due. So I would state that it was an assignment Q&A, and I would be clarifying expectations, and I would absolutely have a few slides and do that. But then I would basically just have conversations with our students. I would get, out of a group of 30, I would get anywhere between like 12 and 20 at one, because they want to know my clear expectations, and they want to be able to say, okay, what do I need to do for my assignment? How is she going to mark? All of those type of things. And I would discuss that. But then for those people who wanted to stick around, I would make myself available. And I used to say, like, how are you guys finding it? Is there anything better that I could do in the course shell? What would you like to see? Open the floor up for a little bit of conversation. And you would be surprised at what kind of feedback you would get from some students. So after each one of those events, over my COVID and working from home, I've received more emails from students saying, thank you so much for that. It really clarified the expectation. I'm so glad that you did this. Not everybody does that. I really like being able to feel like I can contact you. So it really kind of, it built me up a little bit and it built them up a bit. So it was really nice to be able to do that. Another simple thing that I do with regards to opening that kind of positive working environment for the students. It's simple. In my course shells, I have a discussion module that I just basically call it student sharing. And every now and then I'll pop in and say, you know, how are you guys doing? Is there anybody finding things that work well for them or resources? And I'm actually surprised at how well that has been received. I've had students pop in and say, I'm stuck on what electives I should choose. Has anybody done this? And it kind of adds a little bit of that kind of stuff that you would normally do in class. All right, what are you taking next? And what instructor did you like? Or so to have that little opportunity and provide your students space for that sharing of information helps build relationships with student to student, but also with instructor to student. And it doesn't have to be anything formalized. It's just, you know, you put it out there, and some students gravitate to it and some don't. With regards to scaffolding of content, this is one of the things that will help build their confidence, as well as builds on those kind of knowledge-based things. I always find it hard when, especially with first-year students, people have these expectations that of certain things that they should know. And it's really hard over our online learning that when you're not seeing those students, they do one course with another instructor, and then they come to you and you assume that they know everything from all of those learning objectives. And then they get to you and you're like, oh, I thought you knew that. So sometimes we make these assumptions, and I think we need to ensure that our students are kind of meeting these key milestones and creating those milestones for them, because not every student is going to know how to write a technical report, or not every student knows APA. Not all, you know, so the very simple things like how to format a document in Word. You would be surprised at how many students do not know how to do this. Insert a page break was like a mind-blowing to one of my students. So it so if you like, I noticed that certain things early in the course with regards to those simple concepts, and then sometimes I will reach out to those students and say, listen, there's a great video here on how to format or how to do this, and you kind of make sure that they're meeting those milestones to kind of, it builds their confidence and kind of creates that positive experience between instructor and students as well. So it's kind of like to just, I know in larger classes, it's not always possible to provide all of that feedback, but one of the things is that I make a personal goal, which I'm not really sure how I got roped into doing it, but I did it, and now my students like hold me to it and they love it so much, is that I try to provide, I give myself 1 week to provide feedback back to them on an assignment that they submit. And I do that now because as a student, I absolutely hated waiting around for weeks and weeks for feedback. I'm waiting then for that feedback to apply it to my next assignment. And if I don't get that feedback, it makes you feel deflated that the instructor is not caring about it, right? So I do really try to provide my students quick feedback. And how I do that is by using the tools that Mon and Brightspace has provided us. So using online rubrics, building in that stuff into your course shell so that it is easier for you on the back end to provide quick and efficient feedback to students. And I find that that really helps. Like I get emails all the time from students that actually write me and say, I appreciate that feedback so much. I appreciate how quick you get it back. Thank you for that. And I feel like saying, but that's my job. But I don't think they get that from all their instructors to get that feedback and being able to apply it then for those students that are trying to do that progression, right? So they really do appreciate that that feedback. And then my last kind of point here is our universal design for learning. So creating that space for in-class engagement, creating that meaning to their learning. The key here is to why are they learning this? And who here has ever sat in a class and said, why the heck am I learning this? So I kind of try to reiterate that to my students that you're learning this simple concept in oceanography because this simple concept is now the building block for all of your other courses. So where does your course fit into the big scheme of their learning? And sometimes you would need to take a look at those bigger course structures and the larger picture in order to formalize that meaningful learning. Why are they learning it? Once they're invested in the why, you're going to get more uptake in the engagement. And then this also links back to what I had talked about with our goal development, allowing the opportunities for reflection. Having the students reflect on what they're learning and how they're going to use it is going to be key in them buying into it. How are they actually going to push this content forward? How are they going to use it long term? And that can be very simple, like I said, as what I call a guided reflection, because a lot of our students will still need guidance. So posing those questions to get them to think about the connections of those learning objectives, of the bigger picture. So, and Brightspace has great tools in that you can use for that. Like Brightspace can allow instructors for that immediate feedback to encourage reflection. They have surveys built in there. There's a lot of tools there that if you're interested in doing that, you can do that. Another thing that I've used in Brightspace that my students really like was the intelligent agents. So when my students click on my course shell and log in for the very first time, I think it's 9 o'clock at night. That's probably incorrect. My Brightspace people can let me know that. But an email gets sent to them saying, hi, Alicia, welcome to my course, welcome to this course. I see you've logged in for the first time. And then I write an email, but it is populated based on their name and their username. So it appears that the email says, hi, Alicia, welcome to my course. I see you logged in for the first time. Please make sure you check this, this, and this. I can be reached at this time. My office hours are located here. I look forward to working with you, Georgina. So that's a very simple tool that on the back end took maybe 5 minutes to set up. And my students email me back saying, thank you so much for that email. And they feel like I really reached out to them. And it just makes that initial connection of I'm available and I'm here for you. So it is something that can be easily done to add that validation to them as individuals. So what's next? I'm checking my time here because I was like, if not, I'll rant all day. So what's next? So the aim of the instructor should be to increase that self efficacy and motivation and in turn, that will then increase the students' opportunity for self-regulation. They will hopefully become those independent learners who have that time management, who are engaged in their courses. And then once they like something, they have more of an opportunity then to have the confidence to speak out and say, you know, I really liked how someone did this in this course, or I really like this, or how she organized this really made sense to me. So they will then take those tools, put it in their little side toolbox that we all have, and carry it forth. And that's kind of what we want to create. So increasing engagement in your class is going to increase student motivation. And by increasing that student motivation, you're going to increase that opportunity for students to become self-regulated learners, which we would all love to have in all of our classes. All of those students who come prepared and engaged. So creating those opportunities for your students in your courses, they're not going to get it all. They're not going to get everything. But at some point, I would love for one of my students to walk away and said, I had a really great class with Georgina. I really learned this. I really felt this way. And one of the things I did for last fall is I did one of those poll everywheres, but I created it like a challenge, sorry. So at the end, it was my course review. And by the end, one student came out on top, and I still owe her a Tim Hortons breakfast sandwich and a coffee. So I told her, I said, I promise the next time I see you in person, because she's a first year student, I will ensure that I have your Tim's coffee and your breakfast sandwich for coming out on top. And she still to this day says, Georgina, you owe me a breakfast sandwich. And I'm like, when I see you in September, I will have that there. So it could be the simplest things but she's now motivated. She comes to my class and she participates, and it's the simplest things on the back end that surprisingly brings up your students' confidence and their motivation. So let's share. So here are some questions for you guys. I do not see the chat, but I've been told, I think, Jason, you're monitoring the chat.
I'm on it.
So basically, these are these questions I want you guys to think about. Have you ever been disengaged as a student? Have you ever received encouragement that gave you that confidence boost? And how did that make you feel? And the other one is do you remember your favorite instructor? And what were those characteristics of that instructor? Because ideally, you should be that instructor you wanted to have or want to have. So, like, how do you guys feel about that? Have you guys, can you picture in your head that favorite instructor? Trying to look if I can figure out how to pop out. Oh, I can pop out the chat. I got it here.
So folks, feel free to unmute and have a say, or pop it in the chat.
So if you had a favorite instructor, like what would be their characteristics? I know one of my favorite instructor or favorite characteristics of an instructor is humor. Like there's nothing better than someone being able to find the humor in things and being able to, you know, create that environment where it's okay to laugh at yourself every now and then. Everybody is going to screw up at some point. But humor and just having someone who is able to actually have like a down the earth conversation with you. It doesn't always have to be about course content.
Georgina,
Absolutely, sure.
Antoinette, yep, go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful presentation, Georgina. And I can really relate to all of what you're saying. But my favorite instructor in School of Nursing, because I'm now a nursing professor, was an African. And why he was my favorite instructor is that he came to class and he set a presence for learning. So he tried to find out, how are you doing? Are you ready for class? Did you have lunch? Did you have breakfast? So how was it on the way to school. So he gave everybody a chance to talk, unleash all of what was pent up and distracting in your mind, and then he would say, talk, talk, feel free. And he gives us a 15 minutes or 20 minutes to talk and relax. And then he said, all right, ready for learning. And it's allow your mind to be taken away from the experience before class, and now you're ready to learn. And so learning was more meaningful.
Yeah, that's great. It's almost like setting the stage in your classroom for that open and learning environment. That's a great point.
Georgina, we had a comment there from Wes who said it's their enthusiasm, this instructor's enthusiasm about the subject matter and the ability to relate with students on a personal level.
Absolutely. Everybody wants someone to be able to be relatable and a little bit of understanding for their situation. And I know our president has encouraged that over the past year with regards to being flexible and creating that.
And it looks like Ruth here had a prof who didn't judge her on her attendance and understood that there were going to be competing priorities and respected that. Mm-hmm. And then Angela says, I can 110% remember my favorite Mun professor. I had 2 courses with him, and what stood out was his relatability. He always showed up to class early, let us get to know him, and reached out to me personally when he saw my success and sometimes struggles, and was always willing to offer help and never judged anyone for something they didn't know or understand. Sue, yes, go ahead.
Hi, Georgina. I really appreciate it. You've given me some really great ideas to take forward into my next future courses. When I think of an instructor that I really related to, she was very personable. I really felt that our input was valued, and that's what I see in the chat, and that's what I remember from this teacher is she really, I can tell after listening to you talk, she was really working on relationship building. But I really felt that it was, I felt comfortable to speak out and to express my opinions. Unlike what I'm doing now, I'm kind of, but I think that I'm trying to also remember as an instructor that the digital space is very different than the classroom space, and that the face-to-face space, and that if I can start to incorporate some of these strategies, more students will feel comfortable, even unmuting and speaking, because lots of us as adults don't even feel comfortable doing that. So thanks.
That's a great point, Sue. One of the things I do, 2 things actually about the unmuting and someone else about showing up early. Angela said about he used to show up early. So my classes, for example, would start at 10 a.m. I open up my classes 5 minutes early. So my Brightspace course shell will always have it starting at 9:55. And that's for that reason. So I'm always here and I'm ready to go with my coffee in hand and my notes. But those first 5 minutes waiting for all the other students to arrive are, how was your weekend? What did you guys watch on Netflix? Any good recommendation? Like just all of these type of things, like how are you finding it? And sometimes I get course questions, and other times I just sit there and just chat with the students for 5 minutes. And then I say, okay, it's about a minute after 10. We should have everybody by now. And during that time, I also say, okay, who's going to show me your faces? And I do sometimes have some students sign on and turn their cameras on. Others are sitting in their bed and saying, Georgina, I can't see you today. So it creates that little 5-minute window where everybody is just here and chatting, and it's not, you have to do this and this, it creates a little bit more of opening it up. And it's 5 minutes. It's just an extra 5 minutes, and they appreciate that.
Georgina, we've got a comment there from Don who says, I really appreciate instructors that participate in the discussion forums at the learner level. They share their experiences, but also share what they are learning from the students. It is always encouraging when an instructor shows an appreciation of the student's experience and what they are taking away from that. And then Sarah says, I found that the instructor make all of the difference to a course. One of the main reasonings for becoming a teacher is being able to have the impacts on students that my instructors have had on me. Relating to everyone else, building a relationship, and having a personable instructor adds a whole other level to the course, even if that has nothing to do with the actual course content.
That's excellent comments. And the funny thing is that you can just read through those comments and what we've just talked about. It's the same threads, right? So it's that you like to be able to talk to your instructor. You like them to be able to hear you and encourage you and participate with you. And that makes the difference. With regards to the discussion, I do close my discussions. This helps keep everybody on track, but I close them because after I close them, I grade them immediately and provide that feedback. So I use an online discussion rubric. And if anybody ever wants, I don't mind sharing any of my materials. So feel free to email me and I will share whatever I can share with people, because as a student, I loved being able to get participation feedback back and not just a random grade on the end of the course. So, but that gives the opportunity to say, I really liked how you use this personal example, or I did whatever, right? And it makes it a little bit more personable. Yep, that's great.
Another comment here from Angela, the most disengaged. So to keep this balanced here, I guess, the most disengaged I was as a student was when I had an instructor who simply walked into class, immediately started teaching, and then walked out at the end of class. I didn't feel motivated. I didn't feel like my success or failure mattered to them.
Excellent point, Angela. And you're right. You're setting that stage. It's like we come in as actors and you create that stage for your students, and your stage is your classroom. So how you come in and you act for those students is how they are going to feel and act towards you. So if you come in and cold and you're disengaged and you're down to business and then you leave, and you don't provide that opportunity for that more meaningful learning, it's exactly what your students are going to feel. And you said you didn't feel motivated, which I'm going to click here on my next slide. How do you guys motivate your students and engage your students, whether that be in class or online? You heard some of my ways, but what are some ways that you guys would motivate and engage your students?
Denise here is relating. I can remember
Yes.
when instructors did that. Upon reflection, this behavior is really difficult for students on many levels.
Absolutely. Yeah, and in order to motivate your students, like I said, it doesn't have to be that fancy, really. 5 minutes before class, engage them, encourage them to you know, examples of, I tell my students what I do. I said this weekend, I went to the camper, or I walked my dog, or I had a great hike, and they feel more on your level, right? And then they are more likely to share those experiences with you, right?
So a couple of comments here. Sue says, I ask students to share their experiences related to course content. Karen says, get students to explain concepts to each other in group work. Paula says, thank you for the tips, Georgina. Wonderful. Yep, makes you human.
Yep.
Use a variety of active learning.
Absolutely. And encouraging those students to even engage virtually using the things like your online pollings and the mentees and all of those different resources might be a nice way to get started, because it's still very anonymous, but they're being engaged in another way. Once they start, you kind of do those stepping stones. Then I have students sometimes that I'm saying, okay, you be quiet now, someone else got to talk. So because they start to feel really comfortable with you.
one of the things, I'll just put a plug in for breakout rooms. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed in teaching with students, but also working with instructors, is it's amazing the engagement that you can get in a smaller room, 2 or 3 students, as opposed to having, you know, that full room. So I think that's certainly online has been and I guess in the class as well, but online has really helped to increase that engagement and participation.
Yeah, Siri makes a good point there about rewarding behaviors. Yeah. Google Docs, yeah, mind mapping. Now, I haven't done much of that, Sue, but it's definitely something that I would absolutely look into. Yes, absolutely. Go ahead and share.
Okay, for me, sometimes I use their learning style to create something as to what they learned from the previous class. So persons will come back with a dub poem, they will come back with a song, they will come back with a story. However, they feel creative in their learning style and share with the class, and the others will learn from it because they said, wow, I didn't even perceive it in that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And look, when I kind of talk about, or when I teach people about learning styles that aren't really, we're no longer in the box, and I can say that because I'm physically in a box right now. We're no longer in this little box, so we're going to push out of these boxes. With regards to learning style, is that I try to get people to absolutely understand how they learn so that they can better study and manage their learning. But with regards to the instructor, it's try to hit on all of them, right? You're trying to, you know, use your vocals, use visuals, that type of thing, creating that dynamic learning experience so that people have multiple opportunities for that. Yep. That's a great comment there, Vicky, with regards to just sharing things like, you know, about the world and celebrity gossip and humor. And that's the stuff that students really remember about how you kind of reach out to them. I've gotten really good Netflix recommendations over COVID with my students. I watch a lot of stand-up comedians, so a few of my students were kind of exchanging of different things. Sharing Spotify playlists, yeah. Absolutely. But it's just different ways to engage with your student to kind of create those meaningful experiences. Once you get them to do those buy-ins to your course and to see you as a human and you see them as that and realize that we're not just one course and one focus, we have multiple things going on and we're always kind of doing our juggling act. Just to be able to be available to them is going to make a huge difference in how they interact with you as a student and instructor and how they actually interact with that course content. So I'm almost out of time and I really didn't think I was even going to take an hour. So thank you guys for your active participation.
Awesome. So we have just a couple of minutes left. I want to make sure that we end on time and let folks get some refreshments and stretching. So any final questions for Georgina? Go ahead, Sue.
Georgina, just a quick question. When you do the Q&A and it's optional, is that in addition to like a synchronous, are you talking about when you're doing asynchronous learning or synchronous? So I just wasn't sure when you're doing that.
With my asynchronous learning. So some of my undergraduate courses are mostly asynchronous with regards to, you know, I have weekly learning guides. They pace themselves through. They know their deadlines and their discussions and that type of stuff. However, I provide those opportunities for like the 2 Q&A sessions through, and it's evening times. So normally what I'll do is I put it, so I have a 4-year-old. He goes to bed at about 7:30. So at 8 p.m. Newfoundland time, I'll hop on for an hour and one of them will say be on a Monday night. And then the next one would be on like a Thursday night. And I do that knowing that some people may work consistent or have commitments, like someone might go to hockey every Monday or whatever the case may be. So I do it in the evenings for those people who may be working or just allowing a little bit of flexibility. But I do record them and I do post them after the fact, both in my news feed and link them into to show them how to get to those recorded videos for it. So if they did miss it, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I never would have thought to do it in the evening, and that's actually a really cool idea. Thanks.
Yep.
Anything else? Okay, so if not, so we've come to the end of our time together this morning. Thanks to Georgina, and thanks for everyone for attending, and not only attending, but engaging and participating.